Hey there, everyone, and welcome to another video. It's Cassandra from CassandraTyndall.com, and today I have the wonderful Michele Finey here to discuss her work in the WellBeing Astrology magazine for 2023. If you don't know what the WellBeing Astrology magazine is, this is it. So I've got a copy here. This is the 2023 edition. As usual, it has the annual horoscopes written by me, and there's a moon calendar. We've also got our articles this year from an array of wonderful astrologers, Michele being one. So we've got Wade Caves, we have Kelly Surtees, we have Alicia Yusuf, Alex Trenoweth, Gary P. Caton, and many more. So unfortunately, the publisher does not ship hard copies internationally, but I will put a link in the show notes below where you can get a digital copy. And of course, if you're in Australia, Coles, Woolies, the newsagents, and you can also order it direct from the publisher if you're on if you jump online and grab it there, because they do tend to sell out really quickly. So today we're going to be talking with Michele, and her work was not only featured in the magazine for this edition, but also there's a book called The Test of Time. And so Michele's speciality for her contribution to well-being was all about stationary planets. So I'm going to shut up now, and I'm going to introduce you to a fellow Aussie, Michele Finey. Welcome, and thank you for your wonderful work.
Oh, thank you, Cassandra. And I would hate to start on a sort of a contradiction, but my surname's Finey.
Oh, Finey, sorry, fine. Oh, that's easy to remember because the work was fine.
So just think how are you today? I'm Finey, thank you.
Us Aussies coming in with the jokes straight up.
Thanks, and great to be with you and to sort of talk about the magazine and some of my work on stations. It's great. It's been a passion of mine for a while.
Yeah,
stationary planets.
So tell us, before we'll just backtrack a bit, your maybe history in astrology, how you got into it. Always a good journey.
I grew up in a sort of a fairly eccentric household. My grandfather was a Piscean artist with actually a lot of mutable planets in his chart, and he wasn't an astrologer, but he was a bit of a philosopher, and so he'd often talk about the other fish that was tied to him and try to pull him in another direction.
Oh.
I had two Taurian aunts who were, one was always buying the cheapest goods and the other one always wanting the most expensive ones.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother, for reasons I still don't know, bought a copy of, actually I've got it here, funnily enough, Ronald Davison's Astrology, published in 1969 when I was 10 years old. She bought it, she said, because she thought I might need it one day. She never could really explain that why. So I always had an interest in astrology, I think, from a young age. I was about 20, 21 when I first calculated a chart, and back then you had to do it by hand,
mm-hmm.
Pre-computers and lots of things. So it sort of started from there.
Yeah.
And so I've been doing astrology for a long time now, over 40 years. So
it's the good old star signs are the gateways, aren't they? Understanding personality dynamics and those kind of character traits. So a big part of your work that you've done for well-being, and of course, you know, your own passion project, has been stationary planets. And what I loved about this work and inviting you onto the well-being team for 2023 was that in astrology, we have a lot of people, you know, obsessing over retrogrades and things like that, but there's not much literature out there about a stationary planet in the birth chart. So if you would like to speak a little bit to that,
sure.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. Look, I suppose I wrote an article for the Mountain Astrologer in 2014, I think it was, around there, and did some research and found, you know, it was a particular focus seemed to be attached to the planets concerned. I actually start off with a bit of a mathematical investigation into the nature of stations, because a lot of astrologers have different orbs of time that they allow.
Yeah.
And I wasn't convinced that having this shadow period idea really kind of made sense mathematically. When you plot it, it does make sense. Anyway, so I started with that and then did some research into a lot of my database or my natal charts, clients' charts, event charts, that I've collected over the years. And it seemed to me that stations were quite significant, and I wanted to find out exactly what kind of orb they might have, how long a station was in effect, or in effect, I suppose, how slow a planet needs to be moving for it to be noticeable. It seems like when they're particularly slow or virtually stationary, there's a potential for it to be a focal point in the chart. Now, traditionally, I'm not a traditional astrologer, but for example, in horary work and in some traditional perspectives on stations, it's talked about as being a weakness in the chart, or ineffective, or malefic, or those kinds of words. But that's not always the way it's viewed, even back then. And I think today most modern astrologers tend to see it as being a point of emphasis.
Yes.
And I certainly would agree with that. And it doesn't mean, though, that stationary planets are easy necessarily, but they can be, they can be very challenging. But there seems to be something about a stationary planet that is a point of emphasis, definitely, in the chart. Going back, I read a bit in Tetrabiblos, Ptolemy wrote way back when, saying that he thought they were like planets on the ascendant or midheaven. They were actually as strong as that, and they're really the strongest planets we find in a chart.
Yeah.
So, and the research I've done certainly seems to back that up.
Yeah.
So I continued the research after that initial article, and always had planned to write a book about stations. Just didn't get around to it for a while until in lockdown number 6, I think it was, in Melbourne.
Yes, well, you're in the lockdown capital of the world, a little bit south of me. Yeah.
So I thought, look, let's just do this. And in fact, it didn't take that long to put together, because I had done a lot of research prior to putting the book together, and it was really more a process of putting it in one piece. I had to do some additional work, obviously. And and it came out earlier this year. So
yes, I know it's brand new, and I love the cover. Those astrological glyphs. Yeah, when I opened it, I was like, I really love this cover. Yeah, so in the book you discuss, some of the I guess, the development of the interpretations. You also go into the astronomy of the stations, and the fact that it is a earth-centric phenomena. I think that's something we have to really consider as well. And bringing that unique point of emphasis is a really good way to look at that. But you've gone through the planets, as well as you've included a lot of asteroids. So for those people who do work with asteroids, this is going to be adding definitely another level to interpretations and working with the sky.
Yeah, I was in two minds as to whether to include that material initially, because I hadn't done research into those. That was part of the additional work I did for this book in particular. Yeah. And I felt like I wanted to include only the 4 main asteroids, and I also include Hygeia and a couple of the dwarf planets as well. Hygeia I included because I live in a street named after the goddess of healing.
Oh.
So I thought, no, I should include. I've looked at her in particular astrologically for some time in charts, and thought, no, I'll include her as well. So that was really interesting to consider how those asteroid planets and goddesses function when they're stationary.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's really interesting because we'll often like look at stations in transits, but we won't necessarily factor in stations in, what does it mean natally? So yeah, this is really great work. And when we think, so you've got, this book is littered with chart examples, a whole bunch of famous people with different stationary planets and asteroids. I think there was a section here I remember searching, how to find this in solar fire, and but also like really good tips and tricks, difficulties associated with Jupiter, or how you can overcome that. So it's not just kind of like, here's my body of research, but also using it in lots of tips and tools so people can take this research and take this information and apply it to their clients or to their own charts if they have a station.
I was really pleased to incorporate that, and I think that's one of the gifts of stations. In fact, in transit when they come along, I told this story actually at the conference in Adelaide when I presented there on this topic back in June. I had COVID in April, around about the time that Pluto stationed, and I was feeling utterly miserable and just lying on the couch, not doing anything. And I went out into the backyard for some fresh air, and I wandered around and happened for no particular reason to wander over behind a water tank, and the neighbour's pomegranate tree was hanging over the fence with ripe bursting pomegranates on it. And so I had a really bad throat. I had laryngitis along with the COVID. And I know pomegranates are really healthy. And of course I knew the story of Pluto and Persephone and so forth. So I thought, well, I'm just going to grab some pomegranates and bring them inside and juice them. Maybe they'll help my throat. But I went on the internet to find out if pomegranate juice was good for sore throats, because they are quite
antioxidant. Yeah.
Quite strong in the flavour. So anyway, I found this whole amazing amount of research that's been done on pomegranate, the benefits of pomegranate juice. I mean, not just random websites, but in-depth, clinical trials and all sorts of stuff on pomegranate juice. So I came in feeling miserable in my jammies and made the effort to squeeze the juice through a cloth.
Yeah.
Don't put pomegranate seeds in your juicer. They'll just, you end up in a mess. So I did this, and I'm in the middle of doing this, and there's a knock at the door, and I go to the front door, and of course I can't open it because I'm in lockdown with COVID. It's my next door neighbour, who they're in their 80s, and he said, I can't open the door, signalling through the door, and I couldn't talk because I had no voice. And I said, look, He said, oh, that's okay, Michelle. I just came to tell you there's some pomegranates hanging over the fence if you want them.
Oh.
So clearly I thought this was like a message from stationary Pluto, because Pluto was stationary.
Yeah.
And it occurred to me, and this was after the book was published, but it occurred to me this was a classic example of how we can focus and tune into a station when the stationary planet comes along. I think we often, busy lives, we're rushing around. If a planet's slow or appears to be slow, it's like an offering for us to get in touch with it. It's giving us perhaps time to pause and reflect on it.
Yeah.
And if I hadn't been sick and not doing anything, of course, none of this would have happened. And I was sort of still and quiet when this
and that April station was quite potent because it was the final one, the final station retrograde that we will have of Pluto in Capricorn. So
very intense.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, oh, we're backing up for the last leg of this long, laborious cycle. Yes, for sure. So it's funny how I'm sure every astrologer who has contracted the plague has analyzed their astrology of contracting it. Yes, I had mine basically it's the first week of 2022. So obviously I, gathered with people Christmas, New Year. And because of the state that I'm in, we were basically in our borders were closed. We pretty much, just stayed in our bubble up here in Queensland. And of course, once the borders finally opened for the holidays, we all kind of, were knocked down like 10-pin bowling balls or pins, I should say. And yeah, so I got it sort of pretty much the first week of the year. And I was like, this is not how I wanted my 2022
No,
to
not the way you want to start the year.
I know. And it's never a fun time of year for an astrologer to just have to go, I can't work for 2 weeks while I recover from this, because the brain fog was a thing. But anyway, we're back on track right now. But yeah, no, it's funny, all of the various stories of the astrology behind the contracting. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
So as you said, this is a brand new book. It was only published this year. I've read it and I love it. It's just so many, and what I know this is not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but I love all the Aussie examples in there. So it's always refreshing for us to have some people that maybe not everyone else will know.
Yeah.
So you don't consult, you don't do
no longer
or anything, semi-retired and
semi-retired. I decided a few years ago I'm also a qualified hypnotherapist, and I've been practicing as an astrologer and hypnotherapist. Well, astrology since the mid-80s and hypnotherapy since the early 90s, 1991, along with, all the other stuff that you do astrologically. But I decided a few years ago not to see clients anymore. I just felt like, I think writing and research has always been my main passion. I've got quite a bit of Virgo and Scorpio in my chart, and I think that's
pull
really
things apart. Yeah.
So I like to focus in on doing that, and I'm very much an introvert. I'm quite happy in my company doing that sort of stuff.
Well, if you keep on pumping out the books, I mean, we're all going to be better off for it. So it's great that you found. Yeah. So what are the other titles that you've released?
Well, the first one was in 2009, which was a sun sign book that Alan and Unwin published called Secrets of the Zodiac. It's got a bit more meat than your average sun sign book. I think it's actually still in print, which is
great.
You can still get it, I think, online. Anyway, it's based on the concept that I can see your cat. It's based on the concept that we kind of evolve as we travel through the zodiac. So kind of learn from the signs as we go through. So, Virgo can, I guess, learn something about relationships from Libra and and so on. So that's the general theory behind it. So that was 2009. My second book, Wessex Astrologer published, The Sacred Dance of Venus and Mars, which is a huge, I don't even know how I did the research now. It explores thousands and thousands of years of Venus-Mars conjunctions and extrapolates what all that means, the whole depth and breadth of the cycle. In fact, Margaret at Wessex is we've just updated that book, and I've put some extra material into a new edition that's just come out. So that was 2012 initially, and a new edition's just been published. So I've had a very, very busy year.
Yeah.
This is my third book, and I'm currently working on a fourth, but that's very, very early days yet, so I don't really want to talk about that just now.
No, it's usually the way to go. Don't yeah. I get it. Well, it's wonderful that there's going to be an array of publications from a in the trenches astrologer with loads of experience, which is really, really great to be able to hand that wisdom down for people. So what we'll do is we'll pop links in the books if you would like to learn more about Michelle's work and, of course, how to get the magazine. But I guess the $64 million question I'm wondering, and I'm sure some of our listeners are wondering too, now, do you have any stationary planets?
I do, actually.
Okay. You don't have to divulge, of course, but it's always curious to see.
Well, it was within 4 days.
Okay.
So it's stationed direct 4 days after I was born, which is within the orb that I allow.
Yeah.
Stations. It's a little bit different, that orb, than you might be familiar with. Most other astrologers use a set 1 day or 2 days. But if you just stretch that out a bit, you'll realise that planets don't move that much in that time frame.
No.
So it's based on a percentage of average speed.
Daily motion. Yeah, exactly. Depending on the speed will depend on the orb, right?
Yeah, well, that's right. With Mars, Mars has got the most longest synodic cycle, and so it makes sense that it's got a bit more time stationary,
sure.
like within that period of being slow enough to have an effect.
Which we're all going to experience in the trenches over the next few months.
That's just around the corner, I think.
October 30, stations retrograde. Yep. So
yes, and we've got Pluto, Mercury going direct soon, Pluto on the 9th, and followed by Saturn, all going direct, and then Mars retro at the end of October.
Yep, it's going to be joy for many of us, especially for all those Gemini people.
Yes, it's going to be quite intense.
Yeah. It'll be very messy transit. Well, Michelle, it's been great to introduce you to everybody, and hopefully we're going to see a whole lot more of you. And the book is fantastic. Thank you once again. Lots of practical, useful information. So love it. Thank you so much.
Sarah, it's been great.
All righty. Well, great to connect with you. I'll see you next time.
Thanks a lot.
Okay. Bye. See you later.